The evening light filters dimly through the window of a modest home. The room is bathed in muted tones, casting long shadows across the worn-out furniture. A clock ticks loudly, its sound magnified in the silence. The tension hangs heavy in the air, suffocating, almost tangible. The man at the head of the table sits tall, his expression set, eyes sharp as he surveys the room. The mother, seated to his right, shifts uncomfortably, fingers nervously twisting the edge of a napkin. Her face bears the signs of fatigue, lines etched from worry and sleepless nights. Across from her, their son sits with a stillness that betrays the storm brewing inside. The dinner table is more than just a place to eat, it is a battlefield, each meal a silent test of will. The man's voice cuts through the room, controlled, questioning, each word laden with unspoken commands. His gaze flicks to his wife, then lands on her son, searching for any sign of disobedience or defiance. The son meets the gaze, steady, unwavering. The exchange is brief, but it sends a ripple through the room, unnoticed by no one. The younger children sit quietly, their eyes darting between the adults, unsure where to focus, their small frames tense. The mother looks at her son with a subtle plea, her lips parting as if to say something, then closing again as she thinks better of it. The silence stretches once more, broken only by the scrape of a fork against a plate. The atmosphere is thick, each movement slow and deliberate. The man sets down his fork with a deliberate clang, an unspoken signal that the dinner is over. He pushes back from the table, the wooden chair groaning under the shift, and stands. He surveys the room one final time before stepping out, leaving the family in the wake of his departure. As the door to the living room swings shut, the quiet returns, but it is not the kind that brings peace. The mother's eyes dart nervously to her son, who remains unmoved, his jaw clenched, eyes focused on the far wall as if looking through it. The two younger siblings shift uneasily, a little girl with wide eyes and a younger boy who fidgets with the hem of his shirt. The mother's expression softens for a moment, a mix of fear and guilt. She reaches out a trembling hand as if to touch her son's, but the movement stops midway. He looks at her, expression unreadable, then rises from his seat without a word and walks out of the kitchen. The creak of the stairs echoes in the small home, followed by the sound of a door closing. The mother sighs, the weight on her chest heavy as she gathers the dishes, her hands shaking as she works. The little girl looks up at her mother, searching for reassurance that never comes. The boy shifts, eyes downcast, and picks up a fork that fell during the silence. Upstairs, the bedroom is a sanctuary and a prison all at once. The room is sparsely decorated, with a small bed pressed against one wall and a desk cluttered with books and scattered papers. A single window looks out over the quiet street, where the last light of day fades into the shadow of night. The young man stands by the window, the soft glow of a street lamp casting his silhouette against the wall. He takes a deep breath, fingers gripping the edge of the windowsill until his knuckles whiten. The silence outside is almost comforting, a stark contrast to the turmoil within. The faint laughter of children playing a few houses down drifts through the window, mingling with the chirp of crickets. The sounds are distant, reminders of normalcy that feel worlds away. The young man's gaze shifts down to his clenched fists, the skin taut over bone. He releases them slowly, the tension easing but not disappearing. Downstairs, the mother's voice can be heard in low murmurs, speaking softly to the younger children, ushering them to their small room. The creak of their door and a whispered "good night" signal the end of another day marked by quiet endurance. The house settles into an uneasy peace, each family member locked in their thoughts, waiting for the next time the silence will be shattered. The morning light seeps through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. The quiet house slowly stirs to life as footsteps creak down the hallway. The young man sits at the edge of his bed, staring at the worn-out floor, lost in thought. The muffled voices of his mother and younger siblings reach him, their words indistinct but filled with routine. He takes a breath, pushes himself up, and moves toward the door, steeling himself for another day. The kitchen is already bustling when he enters, the air thick with the smell of toast and eggs. His mother stands at the stove, the strain in her posture visible as she moves mechanically, glancing nervously at the clock on the wall. The younger boy is seated at the table, his small legs swinging back and forth as he draws circles on a piece of scrap paper. The little girl clings to a doll, watching her brother with wide, silent eyes. The moment stretches as the young man steps into the room, his presence noted but unacknowledged. A knock at the door interrupts the quiet shuffle. The mother flinches slightly, the sound startling her, but she recovers quickly, moving to answer. The door opens to reveal a neighbor, an elderly woman with kind eyes who stops by to drop off a borrowed dish. They exchange polite, whispered words, smiles forced, and the neighbor's eyes flick briefly past the mother to the scene within the house, curiosity and concern warring in her expression. The mother closes the door, turning back with a strained smile that quickly falls away. Moments later, the heavy thud of boots on the porch signals the return of the man of the house. The young man's shoulders tense at the sound, muscles tightening instinctively. The air shifts, a collective pause as the door opens and the man steps inside. He scans the room, eyes cold and assessing, before turning his attention to the mother. His voice is a low command, asking about breakfast. She nods quickly, moving to prepare his plate. The silence stretches thin, punctuated only by the clatter of dishes and the soft rustle of the newspaper as the man sits, unfolding it with a practiced flick. The young man's jaw sets as he watches from the corner of his eye, catching the slight tremor in his mother's hand as she places the plate in front of her husband. The man doesn't thank her, barely acknowledges her, his attention fixed on the headlines before him. A few tense moments pass before the man's voice cuts through again, this time directed at the young man. A question, sharp, seemingly innocuous, but loaded with an edge that begs for a reaction. The young man's gaze meets his stepfather's, unreadable. He answers evenly, his tone controlled, refusing to rise to the bait. The exchange is brief but electric, eyes locking in a silent battle before the man returns to his paper with a dismissive grunt. The mother's eyes dart between them, relief flickering as the moment passes without incident. She busies herself with cleaning, trying to dispel the tension in the air. The younger boy looks up at his brother, the hint of admiration in his eyes as if sensing the quiet defiance that just played out. The little girl hugs her doll tighter, sensing the unspoken currents swirling around her. The day moves on with the mundane rhythms of life, but the heaviness lingers. The young man goes through the motions, stepping outside to escape the suffocating air of the house. The back porch, peeling paint and all, becomes a refuge where he can breathe. The faint sounds of cars passing by on the street and the laughter of children playing a few houses down reach him, muted but grounding. As he sits there, the door creaks open behind him. The younger boy slips out, his eyes wide and full of questions he doesn't dare ask. He sits next to his brother, their silence a shared understanding. The young man reaches over and ruffles the boy's hair, a rare, soft moment that brings a small smile to the child's face. The peace is fleeting, shattered by a raised voice inside, an argument sparked over a trivial matter, yet carrying the weight of everything unsaid. The young man's muscles tighten as he hears his mother's voice, strained and pleading. The man's response is louder, cutting through the walls like a blade. The boy's eyes dart nervously to the door, and the young man rises, his fists clenching and unclenching as he hesitates at the threshold. Inside, the argument escalates, the mother's voice trembling as she tries to appease, but the tension only grows. The door swings open, and the young man steps inside. The room falls silent at his entrance, all eyes on him. The man's gaze hardens, a challenge sparking as he looks up from his chair. The young man's breathing is steady, eyes locked with his stepfather's as the unspoken confrontation looms. The mother's hand twitches as if to reach out, her eyes wide with fear and something else, hope, perhaps, that this time, something will change. Seconds stretch into eternity before the man stands, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. The two stand face to face, the younger siblings frozen in place, eyes wide with fear and fascination. The mother's breath catches as the silence crackles around them. The young man's voice is quiet but firm as he finally speaks, the words laced with the weight of countless silences, enough. The air thickens as the words hang between them. The man's eyes narrow, his lip curling slightly as he steps toward the young man. The house feels smaller now, the walls closing in, the tension so thick it's almost suffocating. The mother looks on, her hands pressed against her chest as if trying to will herself to stop the inevitable. Her voice trembles, but it's barely a whisper. Please, not today. Not here. But the young man doesn't look at her. His gaze remains locked with his stepfather's. The years of built-up resentment, the countless nights of silence, the hurt and anger, all boil to the surface. The younger siblings stay frozen at the table, eyes wide, uncertain whether to run or stay. The younger boy's hand is trembling, holding the edge of his seat, while the girl presses herself against the wall, clutching her doll for some semblance of comfort. The man's hands curl into fists, the knuckles turning white. He takes a step forward, his voice now a low growl. You think you can speak to me like that? In my house? I gave you a roof over your head. I've raised you. You think you can just disrespect me? His voice rises with every word, each syllable striking with greater force. The young man doesn't flinch. He doesn't move. There is a moment of stillness, as if time itself has paused, the tension too high to bear. And then, with the force of a storm breaking, the first blow lands. The man swings, his fist connecting hard against the young man's face, sending him crashing backward into the kitchen counter. Dishes rattle, and the room erupts in chaos. The young man's vision blurs, pain searing through his cheek, but he doesn't give in. His hand flies up to grip the counter, steadying himself. His eyes are wild now, a mix of fury and pain, but there's something else too, a realization. This is the moment. The moment he's been waiting for, whether he was ready for it or not. With a roar of frustration, the young man pushes off the counter and lunges forward, his body like a spring uncoiling, arms flying as he connects with the man's chest. The sound of flesh against flesh is deafening. The two collide, the force of the impact sending them both to the ground in a tangle of limbs. The man grunts, trying to regain control, but the young man is relentless. He throws a punch, another, landing blows with a savagery born from years of torment. His fists move faster, harder, until the man grunts in pain, struggling to block. The sound of the struggle echoes through the house, a stark contrast to the stillness of the earlier moments. The mother's voice breaks the air with a terrified scream. Stop. Please, stop. Her hand reaches out toward them, desperate, but she doesn't move forward. She can't. She is frozen in place, torn between the man she married and the son she birthed, knowing full well that either way, someone she loves will be broken. The younger siblings are too afraid to move. The little boy's eyes are wide with fear, his small body trembling as he watches the violence unfold. The girl is crying now, her sobs echoing through the house, but no one pays attention to her. The house feels alive with chaos, the very foundation shaking under the weight of years of built-up hatred. The young man's vision is clouded with anger, each punch he throws fueled by the words, the years of maltreatment, the constant reminder that he was never enough. His stepfather, struggling beneath him, grits his teeth, trying to regain control. His hands find the young man's shirt, yanking him off balance, slamming him into the floor. For a moment, everything stills. They are both gasping for air, their bodies slick with sweat. The young man's chest heaves as he pushes himself back to his feet. He's bleeding now, blood running down from his lip, but he doesn't care. He has crossed a line. He knows this. And there's no going back. The man stands as well, his expression a mixture of rage and disbelief. His voice is guttural, almost animalistic as he growls, "You're nothing. You'll never be anything. Do you think you can take me down? The young man's voice is hoarse but steady. It's either you kill me, or I kill you. The words are raw, soaked in anger, desperation, and something else, the grim understanding that this fight, this battle of wills, is the only way forward. In that moment, it's clear that neither of them is backing down. The mother is still frozen, her eyes wide and glassy, tears silently falling down her cheeks. She reaches out, her hands trembling, but no one moves to stop the fight. It's like a dam has broken, and everything held back for years is pouring out all at once. The younger siblings are crying now, the younger boy clutching at his sister, trying to protect her from the brutality unfolding in front of them. But there's nothing they can do. They are helpless, just spectators in this war that has been brewing in their house for as long as they can remember. The physical fight continues, intense and raw. The young man manages to land another blow to the man's side, and this time, the older man stumbles back, clearly winded. For a brief moment, there's a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes, but it's quickly masked by anger and pride. He charges forward again, slamming the young man into the wall. The impact rattles the house, the thud of the young man's body against the plaster sending a jolt through the entire structure. The young man doesn't give in. He fights back with everything he has left. Blood is pouring from his mouth now, but his eyes burn with a fire that won't be extinguished. This is his fight. This is his moment. And he's not backing down. Finally, after what seems like an eternity, the man steps back, breathing heavily, his body bruised and battered. The young man stands, equally beaten, but still standing tall. The house is still, as if the walls themselves are holding their breath. The mother, unable to take it any longer, stumbles forward, her voice trembling as she pleads, "Please, no more. Please stop. I can't watch you destroy each other." But the young man doesn't take his eyes off the man in front of him. The silence is thick and heavy, the words unspoken but clear, there will be no forgiveness. There will be no easy resolution. There will only be the breaking point, the breaking of a cycle that has held this family in its grip for far too long. And in that moment, something changes. The man lowers his eyes, his shoulders slumping as the anger drains from his face. There's no pride in him anymore, only exhaustion. The young man watches him, eyes hard, but there's something else there too. A kind of understanding. The fight isn't over, not yet, but it has reached a turning point. The silence in the room hangs like thick smoke, suffocating the air. The mother stands at the edge of the chaos, tears streaking down her face. Her body trembles as she looks back and forth between her husband and her son, caught in the middle of a battle she never asked for, one she doesn't know how to stop. Her voice quivers as she finally speaks. "Please, don't do this. This isn't the way, we're family. Please." Her plea is desperate, barely above a whisper, but it's clear to everyone in the room that she's saying it more for herself than for either of them. The years of trying to keep the peace, to make everything seem normal, are crumbling in front of her eyes. The younger siblings, wide-eyed and frightened, cling to one another. The younger boy's face is pale, his lip trembling as his sister holds him close. They're confused, scared, unable to process what's happening in front of them. To them, this is supposed to be home, safe, calm, the place where they're protected. But now, it's nothing but violence and fear. The young man, his body bruised and battered, wipes a trickle of blood from his lip. His breath is heavy, his chest heaving with each inhale. His mind is a blur of rage and disbelief. He has never felt this alive, this full of purpose, as though the years of torment had led him to this singular moment. Every punch, every blow he landed on the man felt like reclaiming a piece of himself that had been lost. Every time the man tried to assert his dominance, the young man's resolve hardened. The stepfather's eyes flash with something different now. It's not the wild rage of before, but something darker. Something almost calculating. His breathing slows, his posture stiffens, and for a moment, it's as if the fight has shifted. It's no longer just about power or dominance. It's about survival. And the young man knows it. The cycle is not just about who wins or loses. It's about breaking the shackles of control that have been placed on him for so long. He stands his ground, eyes locked on the man, never backing down. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," he says, his voice barely above a growl. "You can hit me all you want, but you'll never take my dignity again." The words sting, raw and cutting, as though they're the final straw in a long war. It's a declaration, he's done. The man, his body aching from the brutal exchange, takes a slow step back. His chest rises and falls as he regards the young man, his expression changing. There's no anger in his eyes now, but there's something colder. A hardness. "You think I've never had to fight for everything I have?" he mutters, wiping blood from his lip. "You think you're the first one to push back?" His voice is rough, filled with a bitter edge. The young man's face tightens, his jaw clenched. "You never fought for me. You never fought for us." The words are bitter as they leave his mouth, but they ring with truth. The man doesn't respond right away. Instead, he turns away, slowly walking across the room. It's clear that the fight isn't over, but the air between them has shifted. The mother's voice shakes as she steps forward, her eyes pleading with both of them. "Please. Please stop." She reaches out to touch her son's arm, but he pulls away. She looks at him, her heart breaking as she tries to make sense of the chaos. She doesn't know if she should be angry, if she should be relieved, or if she should mourn the loss of her family. All she can do is watch as her children tear each other apart. The younger siblings, their faces pale, still remain frozen in place. They can't move. The young boy clutches his sister, his face a mixture of fear and confusion. The young man looks back at them, his gaze softening for a split second, but he quickly pushes it aside. This isn't just about them anymore. This is about him reclaiming what was taken from him. His manhood. His identity. His right to be seen as a man, not a shadow or an object. The moment of calm between the two men is brief, but it's enough. Enough to give the young man the clarity he needs. He knows now that the man won't stop. He knows that the cycle will continue unless something changes. Unless he makes a stand. He walks toward the door. "This ends now," he mutters under his breath, his voice low and determined. The man turns to face him, his hands still shaking from the earlier fight, but there's a momentary look of doubt in his eyes. The young man pushes the door open, stepping outside into the cool night air, the weight of the battle still heavy in his chest. He feels the pain of the fight, but he feels something else, too, a shift in his soul, like a fog lifting. He knows that even though he walked out of that house tonight, there's still work to be done. Inside, the mother stands motionless. The siblings are still huddled together, the silence deafening. She watches her son leave, but there's no joy in her heart. There's no relief. Only the sharp pain of knowing that the family she tried so hard to hold together is falling apart at the seams. The young man walks away, his footsteps heavy, but with a purpose. The quiet of the night surrounds him as he finds his bearings. It's not victory yet, but it's a start. A new beginning. He's done being controlled. He's done being afraid. He's done being the child. Now, he must face the real fight, the fight to rebuild what has been broken, to reclaim the manhood that was taken from him. The fight is far from over, but for the first time, he's in control. As the night swallows him whole, the house stands in silence. The stage has been set for change. Whether the family can survive it, or whether they will be torn apart, remains to be seen. But for now, one thing is certain, the young man has taken the first step toward his future. The battle may have just begun, but the war for his soul is over. The night air is heavy with the weight of the unspoken, the kind of silence that drips with regret, anger, and the echoes of violence. The young man walks for what feels like miles, his heart racing with adrenaline, his thoughts spinning in every direction. The streetlights flicker as he strides forward, unaware of the time passing, lost in his thoughts. His chest burns, his body aches, but there's a fire inside him that refuses to be extinguished. The bruises on his skin will heal, but something inside him has changed forever. As he walks, memories flood his mind, the years of ridicule, the constant belittling from the man who was supposed to be his father. His fists clenched tightly at his sides, the anger still there, simmering just below the surface. Yet in that anger, there's a sense of clarity now. He knows what he's up against. He knows who the enemy is. But more importantly, he knows who he is. He's no longer the scared boy who took the abuse. He's a man. And he won't let anyone strip him of that again. His phone buzzes in his pocket, snapping him from his thoughts. He pulls it out, glancing at the screen. It's a text from his sister. "Where are you? Is everything okay?" He stares at the words for a moment, his heart aching. She's just a kid, too young to understand the weight of everything that's happened. But the fight, his fight, was never just about him. It was about her, too. About the others. About them all finally seeing that they don't have to live in fear anymore. That they don't have to be silent. He types a quick reply. "I'm fine. I just need time. Stay safe." He hits send and shoves the phone back in his pocket, his mind racing. Back at the house, the tension is palpable. The mother sits in the dim light of the kitchen, her hands folded in her lap, staring blankly at the table. Her eyes are red from crying, but it's not just the tears that haunt her. It's the knowledge that the family is fractured beyond repair. She knows she can't stop what's coming. She knows the damage has been done. Her younger children sit silently around her, unsure of what to do, what to feel. The younger brother, his face streaked with tears, looks up at her. "Mom, what happens now? Is he going to be okay?" She doesn't answer right away. The words get caught in her throat, heavy with guilt. "I don't know, baby," she whispers. "I don't know." The silence stretches, and the youngest sibling, his face twisted in confusion, speaks up. Was it his fault? Was he the bad one? The question stabs through her heart like a knife. "No," she answers, though she doesn't know how to explain. He wasn't the bad one. But sometimes, things just get too much to bear. And people do things they regret. Her voice cracks, and she wipes a tear away. She's failed them. She knows it. She feels it in every fiber of her being. She's failed her son. She's failed her family. The door slams open, and the man enters. His face is bruised and swollen, his shirt torn, but he's still standing. He looks at the family in the room, his eyes scanning over each of them. There's no apology in his gaze, just a hardened look, like he's been through a battle, and he's come out the other side. But deep down, he knows something has changed. The dynamic is broken, irrevocably shattered. "I'm going to fix this," he mutters, though his words sound empty, devoid of any real conviction. He looks at his wife. "We need to put this family back together." The mother looks at him, her eyes filled with so many emotions, disappointment, anger, sadness, but most of all, exhaustion. "I don't think you can fix this. Not this time." He scoffs. "You don't know what you're talking about. We're a family, and families don't just fall apart. We'll get past this." She stands up slowly, her face pale, yet her voice strong. "I've been living with you, trying to make this work for years. But you're not the man I thought you were. You never were." The man's face contorts with rage. "You think you know everything? You think you're the victim here?" He steps toward her, but his words stop dead in their tracks as the young man's voice rings out from the doorway. "Shut up," he says, his voice calm but filled with an undeniable authority. His eyes are hard as steel, and for the first time in a long while, the man sees something different in him, something he's never seen before. The boy he once controlled is now standing in front of him as a man. And this time, he won't be intimidated. The young man steps into the house, his eyes locking with his stepfather's. The air in the room is thick with tension, so tight that it almost feels like it could snap at any moment. The family watches, the siblings wide-eyed, as the two men face off once again. "I'm not your son," the young man says, his words slow and deliberate. "And I'm not going to stand here and let you destroy everything we have left." The man sneers, ready for another round of violence. "You think you can just walk in here and tell me what to do?" "I'm not telling you what to do," the young man responds, his voice cool and steady. "I'm telling you that it's over. Whatever twisted relationship you thought we had, it ends now. You will never control me again. I've taken enough from you. I'm done." The man's eyes flicker with something close to fear, a flicker of realization that maybe, just maybe, the young man is right. Maybe this time, the fight is one he can't win. The room falls silent again. The fight, the chaos, the years of torment, they all hang in the air, waiting for one final moment to decide everything. The silence is broken only by the sound of heavy breathing. The young man's gaze remains locked with the stepfather's, both men standing firm, muscles tense, poised for whatever might come next. The younger siblings watch in wide-eyed silence, their small faces etched with worry, confusion, and a glimmer of hope that things could finally change. The mother steps forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She places a hand gently on her son's arm, feeling the strength and resolve in his stance. Her eyes, wet with tears, meet his. There's a silent exchange between them, a promise, an apology, and an understanding. For the first time in years, she sees him not as a boy who needs protection but as a man who is willing to fight for what's right. She turns to her husband, who now looks less like the monster that loomed over them for so long and more like a man who has lost everything. The hard set of his jaw twitches, revealing cracks in the facade he's carefully constructed over the years. He looks around the room, at the faces of the family he's tormented, his wife, the children, and the stepson who now challenges him with unwavering strength. There is no applause for him here, no validation, only the crushing weight of his failures. "Leave," the young man says, his voice steady, no longer shaking with rage but filled with conviction. "Leave this house and don't come back." The stepfather's eyes widen, and for a moment, he looks as if he might resist, but then something changes. The realization sinks in that he's not just fighting the young man anymore. He's lost the support of everyone in the room. The family has turned against him, and he knows that if he pushes any further, the consequences will be dire. The man takes a step back, then another. The room feels smaller than ever as he turns, picking up his keys from the table with a shaking hand. Without a word, he walks out the front door, slamming it behind him. The echo reverberates through the house, a final punctuation to years of tyranny. The room is still. No one breathes. The young man looks at his mother, who stands with her hand pressed to her mouth, a look of disbelief and relief mingled on her face. He glances at his siblings, their eyes wide but shining with something that hasn't been seen in a long time, hope. A moment passes before the youngest sibling breaks the silence, running to the older brother and wrapping their arms around him tightly. One by one, the others join in, creating a small circle of warmth and unity. The mother steps forward, hesitating only for a moment before pulling them all into a hug, her body shaking with silent sobs. "I'm so sorry," she whispers, her voice cracking with the weight of everything she has held in. "I should have protected you. I should have." "You did what you could," the young man replies softly. The anger in him has started to melt, leaving a deep sense of exhaustion. "We're going to be okay now." They stay like that for a moment longer, holding on to each other as if afraid to let go. The air in the room feels different now, lighter, as if the walls themselves are sighing with relief. The following days are not easy. The family begins to adjust, their routine marked with small steps toward healing. They talk more, share moments that were once silenced by fear. The young man steps up, not just as the eldest brother but as a new anchor for the family. He finishes his schooling, takes on part-time work to help support the household, and spends evenings with his siblings, helping with homework and telling stories to make them laugh. The mother finds strength she didn't know she had, looking for ways to rebuild her own life, piece by piece. One evening, as the sun sets and the sky turns shades of orange and purple, the young man sits on the front steps of the house, watching the street. The shadows that used to seem so menacing now feel like just shadows. He feels a presence beside him and turns to see his mother, who sits down quietly. "Do you think we'll ever be normal again?" she asks, her voice soft, almost afraid of the answer. He looks at her and then at the horizon, where the last rays of sunlight are disappearing. "Maybe we won't be the same normal we used to dream about. But we can make a new kind of normal. One where we're not afraid anymore." She nods, a small smile breaking through the weariness. For the first time, it feels real, like they could make it through this, together. The young man's phone buzzes in his pocket. It's a message from a friend he hasn't spoken to in a while. "Hey, haven't seen you around. Everything okay?" He types back a quick reply, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah. We're getting there." As the night falls, the house behind them is quiet, but not with the silence of fear. It's the kind of quiet that holds promise, the sound of peace starting to find its way back into their lives. And for the first time in a long time, they believe it might just stay. The young man stands up, stretching as the weight of the day begins to settle into his bones. The streetlights flicker on, casting a soft, warm glow over the neighborhood. The world outside seems so ordinary, almost unaware of the battle that had just ended inside this house. But for him, every breath he takes now is a reminder of victory, not just against his stepfather but against the grip of fear that had suffocated him for years. Inside, his siblings have fallen asleep on the couch, huddled together under a thin blanket. The room feels lived in, peaceful. The youngest sibling stirs, muttering in their sleep before settling again, a small, contented smile on their face. The young man smiles, feeling a warmth that starts in his chest and spreads outward. This is what he fought for, this moment of calm, this moment when they could rest without the threat of violence hovering over them. His mother stands in the kitchen, washing dishes methodically. The clinking of the plates and the rush of water are steady, soothing sounds that fill the silence. He walks over to her, leaning against the counter as he watches her. She looks up, catching his gaze, and for a moment, they just stand there, understanding passing between them without the need for words. "I found a part-time job," she says suddenly, breaking the quiet. Her voice is firmer now, the timbre of someone who's begun to believe in herself again. "It's not much, but it's a start." He nods, pride evident in his eyes. "That's good. We'll manage." They both know it won't be easy. The stepfather's shadow might linger for a while, in the quiet moments when memories surface or when trust feels fragile. But they also know that shadows can't hold power unless you let them. They've started to take that power back, piece by piece, moment by moment. In the days that follow, life takes on a new rhythm. The house is filled with sounds that once would have triggered anxiety, laughter, raised voices in excitement, the slam of a door as someone runs in from outside. Each sound is now a testament to freedom, a reminder that they no longer need to tiptoe through their own lives. The young man spends more time with his siblings, playing games, helping them with schoolwork, teaching them things their stepfather never would. One day, while helping his youngest brother build a model airplane, the child looks up at him, wide-eyed. "Are we safe now?" the boy asks, his voice small but hopeful. The young man puts down the pieces, resting a reassuring hand on his brother's shoulder. "Yeah, we're safe now. And we're going to stay safe. I promise." The boy nods, accepting the words as truth because, for the first time, he has no reason to doubt them. At school, the young man's teachers notice the change in him. The slumped shoulders are gone, replaced by a posture that speaks of confidence and resilience. His friends, too, start to see the difference. He's more present, more willing to engage, no longer weighed down by something unspoken. One evening, as the family sits down to dinner, a simple meal, but one they share without tension, there's a knock at the door. The room goes quiet, a shadow of old fear passing through them. The mother's hand trembles as she reaches for her napkin, eyes darting toward her son. He stands, nodding once before walking to the door. He opens it cautiously, heart pounding for just a second until he sees who it is. A neighbor stands there, holding a pie and wearing an awkward smile. "I just wanted to check in. We hadn't seen you folks around much lately. Thought maybe you could use a little welcome back to the neighborhood." Relief floods through the young man. He thanks the neighbor, taking the pie with a smile. The gesture, small as it is, feels monumental. It's a sign that they're not alone, that even in the hardest times, community can offer support. They finish dinner, laughter punctuating their conversations as stories are shared. The mother's laugh is hesitant at first but grows more natural with each passing day. The young man looks around the table, feeling the warmth that only family can bring. This is what they fought for, what they've earned, a life where their days aren't counted in survival but in moments of joy and peace. And as the night falls and the lights in the house flicker off one by one, the young man lies awake for a moment, staring at the ceiling. The memories of that final confrontation replay in his mind, but now they don't haunt him. They remind him of what it took to reclaim their lives. He turns over, the weight of exhaustion giving way to the comfort of knowing that tomorrow is no longer something to fear. For the first time in years, they all sleep soundly, the house settled into a newfound calm that promises better days ahead. As days turn into weeks, the family continues to rebuild their lives step by step. The mother finds more stable work, which allows her to regain a sense of independence she had long forgotten. Her once tired eyes begin to hold a light that hadn't been there in years, as she embraces the freedom of making choices without fear. She begins to attend community meetings and makes friends who offer support and encouragement. The young man, now seen as the protector and leader of the household, grows more confident. He takes on more responsibilities, balancing school and work while ensuring his siblings feel secure and loved. The bond between them grows stronger. His younger brother starts to play soccer at school, no longer flinching at loud noises, and his sister starts drawing again, filling sketchbooks with colorful pictures that tell stories of hope. One day, the mother sits the family down at the dining table after dinner. She looks at each of her children, her eyes filled with gratitude and determination. "I've been thinking," she starts, her voice steady but emotional. "We've come so far, and we've done it together. But it's time we think about what we want our lives to look like from now on. What dreams do we have? What can we build now that we're free to live as we choose?" The room fills with thoughtful silence as they consider her words. It's a moment that feels like a crossroads, a point where their past and future meet. The young man leans forward, a small smile on his face. "I want to study architecture," he admits, a dream he had pushed away during the years of conflict. "I want to build things that last." His mother's eyes shine with pride as she nods. The younger siblings chime in with their own hopes and wishes, a dog, a trip to the beach, learning to play the piano. It's a simple conversation, but it marks a turning point for them all. They are no longer just surviving, they are planning for a future that feels within reach. In the community, word spreads of their story, not the dark, painful details but the resilience they showed. Neighbors who once kept their distance start to greet them more warmly. Some stop by with casseroles or invitations to gatherings, a sign that the family is being welcomed back into the world outside their home. The young man's efforts in school pay off, and he's offered a scholarship for college. It's a milestone that brings celebration and tears of joy. The night he receives the letter, they gather around the table, eating cake and recounting the journey that brought them to this moment. The weight of the past hasn't disappeared, but it no longer defines them. It's become a part of their story, one that they can look back on and say, "We made it through." The stepfather's absence is felt in different ways. There are days when a sudden noise or a raised voice on TV can still make their hearts race. Healing isn't a straight path, and there are moments when memories resurface, bringing with them flashes of fear or anger. But they talk about it now, acknowledging the feelings without letting them fester. The young man often sits with his siblings during these moments, reassuring them with a quiet strength that everything will be all right. As time goes on, the family creates new memories. The house, once filled with silence and dread, becomes a place of music, laughter, and the occasional chaos of everyday life. They host small dinners with friends, celebrate birthdays with homemade banners, and fill the rooms with the warmth of belonging. The mother eventually meets with a support group of women who have experienced similar struggles. Through their shared stories, she finds a sense of community that had been missing for so long. She becomes an advocate for others, using her experiences to help women and families find their voices and reclaim their lives. The young man, now in college, stays connected to his family. He visits often, calling home regularly and making sure they know he's still there for them, even as he builds a life of his own. His journey to study architecture becomes a metaphor for his story, constructing something strong and beautiful out of what once seemed broken beyond repair. And on those quiet nights when he sits by his window, looking out at the world that's finally opened up to him, he feels the certainty of his mother's words echo in his heart: "They've come so far, and they did it together." The future is theirs to shape, not defined by the past but inspired by it, stronger for having survived it. As the story comes full circle, it becomes clear that this journey is not just about overcoming adversity, but about the power of resilience, love, and the courage to reclaim one's life. The family that once lived in the shadow of fear now walks confidently toward a future filled with hope and possibility. Each member has discovered strength they didn't know they possessed, proving that even in the darkest of times, there is a light that can guide them forward. This journey speaks to the reality that countless people face, showing that breaking free from cycles of pain and reclaiming one's sense of self is possible with determination and unity. The young man's resolve, the mother's quiet bravery, and the shared bond among the siblings are a testament to the power of standing together, even when the odds feel insurmountable. To those watching this story unfold, remember, no matter how deep the wounds or how impossible the journey may seem, healing and hope are within reach. If you or someone you know is going through a difficult time, don't hesitate to reach out for help and support. Whether through friends, family, community resources, or support groups, know that you don't have to face it alone. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to reflect on your own journey or the stories of resilience that inspire you. Share this video with others who might need to hear that change is possible, that there is always a way forward. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment with your thoughts or experiences. Your voice could be the encouragement someone else needs to start their own path to freedom and healing. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey. Stay strong, stay hopeful, and remember, every step toward reclaiming your life is a victory worth celebrating.